I'm going to switch to English just in case. Thank you, David, for letting me know. In any case, I am following up on what David has been telling you and sharing with you about user experience within organization, what goes well, what could be better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it from a different point of view and look at it from a customer centricity point of view. I will try to convince you, I will try to make the point that if you want to be involved in UX or you want to do CX, then in essence, what you have to do is you have to be customer minded. Thank you everybody else for joining. Let's jump into it. Again, if you have questions or anything is unsure or anything is unclear or you disagree, please ask. That's always interesting. I would love to address it. All right, let's dive into it. First of all, I don't think it's important for me to emphasize how important it is for organizations to be design-centered or customer-minded or user-focused. No, because McKinsey actually did that as well. There's a lot of consultancies that already have data on what the value is of being very good at design. McKinsey did a study in 2018 that showed that your growth and your return to shareholders will be higher if you apply the principles that are entailed within design, which means involving your user, paying attention to your user, etc. But not only that, David showed a graph a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, about that the value that these companies have, they outperform the benchmark. So if you look at what the Design Management Institute did in 2015, they created a cluster of organizations that they thought did very well at design-centric operations and processes. And they looked at how did they perform with comparison to the S&P 500. And they found that they performed over 200% better than the Standard & Poor's. Again, this is 2015. I'm really curious what they did in the Corona crisis. But in essence, it shows you that it makes a difference. Lastly but not least, McKinsey also did a very pleasant study about the difference between recovering from a recession. So, and it's companies that focus on customer experience that outperform those that do not. And especially within a downturn, an economic downturn, this really can make the difference between companies that do just a little bit less than other ones. You get out of that dip quicker than other ones. Before we dive into the whole customer centricity, I want to address some semantics. We have been doing a lot of interviews with business leaders, and when we address the topic of customer centricity with them, we find that they often have a different definition. Either they say, okay, yeah, but our definition is more based on market orientation. We don't do customer centricity because a market has different customers. So you have to address all of them. So customer centricity doesn't really match what we're saying. Other people say, or other organizations say, well, we don't really have customers. We only have users. And a user isn't always a customer. Valid point. And last but not least, when we speak to, for example, healthcare institutions, they say, well, user centricity or customer centricity isn't relevant to us. For us, it's about patient centricity. And before I dive into the topic of customer centricity, I just want to address with you that for me, these are all part of the same idea, all part of the same methodology, all part of the same mindset. If you want to be market oriented, if you want to be user oriented, if you want to be patient oriented, in essence, it is the same as being customer oriented. And let me make this point a little bit. I know some of you might go like this, I don't entirely agree, and that's fine. Let me try to see if I can change your mind. For the sake of argument, I was debating with my colleagues about what is a definition of customer centricity that would bring the point across of what we're trying to do. And in essence, the definitions that we give here is that customer centricity encompasses all of the actions that shape you as an organization or shape your organization to increase the customer value delivered and captured. And the reason I give this definition is because it's, in essence, it's based on how a business model definition goes. And business model definition is about how do we create, deliver, and capture value. And this is inherently tied to customer centricity. So this definition is a little bit of where we start from. Then, excuse me. Then if we address the difference between user centricity and customer centricity, we might look at a 2x2 matrix like this. again, I'm taking the extreme points of view here. I think there's aspects on this 2x2 matrix that people will disagree with, but that is fine. So, for example, if you look at the organizations that are attribute high user importance or have high importance to the user and high importance to their customers, usually we look at B2B organizations. They have to pay attention to their customer as from a point of view of they will be paying for my services, but they also have to pay attention to the user perspective. How will they use my services in order for them to come back and buy more? Do we provide a pleasant user experience? And then you look at how we provide a pleasant customer experience. So service companies have to do this well. If you then look at the other side, if you look at, for example, the high customer experience, but a little bit less in the user experience, we could look at B2B organizations. Traditionally, they give a little bit less importance to the user. Again, this is changing, don't get me wrong. I'm trying to be a little bit provocative here, but in essence, B2B organizations are a little bit less user focused. Again, very customer driven, but a little bit less user focused. If we then go into the organizations that are very high, that attribute very high value to the users, and here I would like to make the point that for me, a user is also a patient. The patient is somebody that uses the services of an organization, usually a healthcare organization, but doesn't necessarily pay that specific organization for the services. And here we could look into governmental institutions or governmentally funded healthcare institutions, like a hospital. They would never say, oh, we are very customer focused, but they will definitely say that they are user or patient focused. And lastly, but not least, we have the group, again, this is a very extreme view here, that don't pay a lot of attention to their user and the customer. Pharmaceuticals? Question mark? I don't know. Traditional view might be yes. Utility organizations? They don't really provide directly to a user. Academic institutions? When I think back to my studies at the KU Leuven, I always think, are they customer or user-centered? And I would say neither. But again, it's just to show, and the point that I'm trying to make here, if you want to be user-centered, you are already performing some basic activities that customer-centered organizations do as well. In essence, when you are customer-focused, you also look at the touch point of your user. So in essence, this is the point that I want to make before I dive into further into customer centricity. For me, market orientation is the same as customer orientation. User centricity is the same as patient centricity, and customer centricity entails user centricity. Again, it's a long-winded point to say that, in essence, when we talk about all these different semantics, customer centricity, user centricity, patient centricity, they entail the same mindset, paying attention to your customer, paying attention to the people that use your services. And I want to start from here when we go a little bit deeper. In 1991, when I was born, Coley and the authors of this article, they came with a definition of what it means to be market-oriented. And I've been using this definition in the same way to define what it means to be customer-oriented. They define three main pillars in order for an organization to be really market-focused. And they say, does the organization gather intelligence about the market, about the customers, about the current and future needs of the people that will buy their services? That's one. Second thing is, do they spread or do they disseminate that customer intelligence throughout the organization over departments, cross-departmentally? Very important. Are you spreading the information? And thirdly is, does the organization have the responsiveness to act on that information? So you have, let's say, a trifecta of aspects that need to be addressed in order for you as an organization, as a business, as an institution to be really customer-centered. And what is interesting here, if you look at it from a Venn diagram point of view, of course, we're a design agency, so we're going to make Venn diagrams. If you look at the Venn diagram, so you have market intelligence. Are you capturing market intelligence? Are you disseminating that intelligence? And are you responding to that intelligence? What you can also link it, a lot of organizations do one or two, but not three. We got a question here. All right. So If you look at market intelligence, and for example, if you have an organization that is very good at gathering information from the market and not and very good at disseminating it, but not responding to it, that's what I call the group that I call the impotent. So those are the people that really know what their customer wants, or what their user wants, or what their patient wants, and is very good at spreading it throughout engineering, marketing, sales, but is unable to act on it. Don't be impotent. Secondly, what you could look at, you have the organizations that are very good at responding to information, very good at spreading it, but do not have a market orientation. What I mean with a market orientation, they don't have intelligence from the market. And we call this the gut shot. It's these organizations that are very good at doing something, as somebody said, there's a CEO with an idea and he said, let's do it. And the organization is very quick to respond to it. That's what I call the gotcha. It's usually people that do inside-out innovation. And lastly but not least, we have the siloed. And the siloed are the people that gather a lot of market intelligence, a lot of information about their customers throughout the organization. They don't spread it. So nobody knows what the other people, what the other teams are gathering, and they all react to it. So what you get is you get this cacophony of initiatives, activities, research goals. And this is what we often see in governmental institutions, where there isn't really an overview of who is doing what. But this is interesting for you to keep in mind if you are gauging, are we truly customer-centered? This gives a first idea of where you should perhaps be paying attention to. Yet, why are we not doing this today? What is holding us back from really becoming customer-centered? And the first thing that I want to address is that there is this relegation towards creation, which means that organizations push the responsibility to be customer-centered or user-centered or patient-centered towards those that are creating, those that are interested in, for example, doing UX, doing CX, doing design thinking, because they'll say, do it in a project, and in that project, go listen to the customer. And I think that's sad, because in essence, the development process shouldn't be the only time that people go listen to customers. And again, this is also why I think there's so many development processes that have popped up like mushrooms. PwC has one, IBM has one, Google has one, Google's design sprint at IBM. I'm not saying that IBM and Google are not customer focused, because they have a great culture when it comes to them, but it's often the consultancy companies that come with processes that you as an organization can use to become more customer-centered. And for me, I think that's perhaps not the right approach. IDEO has one, the British Design Council have one. Again, for the people that are here, these are different design methodologies that look into how can we create something new, an innovation, a renovation. It doesn't matter, by starting from your user, iteratively developing something, testing it, and launching it. But what is interesting here is, for example, if we take a very traditional one, the double diamond from the British Design Council, it has 2 diamonds. So this is in Dutch, my apologies. So the first one, it goes into problem exploration, and the second one goes into solution exploration. Very interesting. The problem is PwC did a study in 2017 that looked in how many people are actually working in those 2 diamonds. And what you can see is only 5%, and this was a study done in New Zealand, only 5% of the people, 5% were only working the first diamond, which is kind of sad, which it really means that if you look at organizations that say, look, if we want to be customer-centered, it has to be done in the design process, they don't have the people to actually do it. So they focus still more on actually making and doing. And this is kind of unfortunate. Again, this is the original data, and this is problematic. Of course, you could say, yes, Arnaud, this data is from New Zealand, but I fundamentally think that this is also a problem in Belgium. It could be that the percentages have grown over the year, but I still think this is an issue. The same thing with Norman Nielsen. Norman Nielsen is a reference when it comes to everything UX. And they say that if they did a survey with their clients, and they said, why aren't you doing discoveries? And discoveries are the first step that you take in a UX process, where you go to understand who is your customer, who is your user, how did you use my solution? And he saw that a lot of their customers aren't actually doing the discovery phase. They're just skipping it. They're not doing it. Either they don't have any time, they don't have any buy-in, no organizational know-how, or they don't have the resources. And what is interesting here, this survey already shows that the organizations that are trying to push this customer centricity towards the development process, they are having organizational issues to be customer centered. They have time pressures to deliver, which means that the delivery phases are so shortened that they say, you know, which ones we're going to cut is the user research. This is problematic. This is an organizational issue. This is not a process issue. The second one is no management buy-in. Of course, if your manager doesn't understand why you should be doing discoveries in the UX phase, then you have an organizational issue. You have a management issue. This is not a process issue. Third, of course, I'm hitting on the same point again. If there is no organizational know-how of how to run a discovery, again, it is not about the process. It is about the fact that the organization does not know how to gather information. How do we capture customer intelligence? How do we spread customer intelligence? The second hurdle that we often see is that not only do some companies push this whole customer centricity towards those that are creating, but they also push it towards the skills and the departments at the front. What do we mean by this? It's that it's usually sales, customer support, that bear the brunt of delivering a great customer service. PwC in 2017 did a study, and they did a huge survey with, I think, 2,500 people to say, what are you willing to pay for as a customer? And what is interesting, if you look at what pops up, the biggest one that is worth paying for and important is efficiency. And you cannot relegate this to the people that are responsible for sales. A salesperson is not responsible for the efficiency of delivering a solution to the customer. The only thing they can say is, okay, you've bought it. I hope it will be delivered as soon as possible. What I'm trying to, the point that I'm trying to make here is that all of these things that you see here, they are organizational issues. They are organizational hurdles. If efficiency is important, you have to have an organization that is efficient. You have to have a process that is efficient to deliver the services. Another thing that I would like to highlight here is friendly service. Friendly service is a very tricky one, because often when we have a conversation with somebody in an organization, they say, well, our front-end people aren't friendly enough. And then the big question is, yeah, but why isn't that? Oh, well, which KPIs are they chasing? How is their management handling? How is management evaluated? Friendly service is not a customer experience aspect. Yes, it shapes the customer experience, but it is not merely delivered through customer experience. It's having good HR practices. It is having management that is receptive of it. It is having management that knows the right KPIs to reward these. You don't just get friendly service. You have to work towards friendly service. And this is the problem, what we often see when the customers look at this organization, they say, I can't get efficient services. The people that service me aren't friendly. And you get this metaphorical wailing wall, the klaagmuur, people complaining, wow, this organization is really, pardon my friends, shitty. They are not doing what they should be doing well. And it's interesting here because you get both sides of the coin. It's customers saying, I don't get the answers I need. It's going too slow. I have to pay too much. I have to wait too long. I feel like I'm taking advantage of. And on the other hand, you have the manager seeing, oh, we get increased customer support calls. We have churn rates that are increasing. We have employee turnover that is increasing, lower customer satisfactions. And this is, in essence, the result. The problem is not with the customer-facing people. It is with the organization. The organization has fragmented IT system. The organization has an inefficient production system. The cross-departmental collaboration is insufficient. And this is where people say, all of these things cannot be relegated to the front. If you want to be customer-centered, you have to take this as an organizational goal. Another thing that is stopping us from being really customer-centered is that we tend to treat systems. I think a great example, and I'll give you a good example, is this: we try to put lipstick on a pig. And at the end of the day, you say it's window dressing. We put lipstick on a pig and they say, look at this beautiful pig. Yes, it's beautiful, but it's still a pig. An example here is I don't love this example, but I think it shows you that an organization tries to do something and then it's still. So a couple of years ago, there was a United flight that was booked completely full, but there were a couple of air hostesses, or I think it might have been a pilot, that had to go to another hub. And what happens when United does that, they say, is there somebody who wants to give up their seat for our flight attendant? You will receive a voucher, so money with which you can buy a next ticket. Of course, nobody in the flight said me, so they called the police and they said, you get out. This was a doctor that refused. He got punched and dragged off the flight. So great customer service, of course. And again, the first reaction from the CEO was this. I got from Wikipedia, but I think it doesn't matter where it's from. The CEO, the then CEO, Munoz, said, "Well, this customer was disruptive," and it just shows you that yes, they might after the incident they might have tried to give this man more restitution for his troubles and the fact that he got assaulted. But it shows you that the organization is still a pig. This is not an organization that is customer friendly, it's customer oriented, and it won't change. Inherently, there is something wrong with the organization. Even management doesn't see the problem. And again, you cannot treat the symptoms if you truly want to be customer centered. And to use another metaphor, if you have built a kind of organization that does something very well, and suddenly you want to pivot towards customer intimacy, customer centricity, then you have to take into consideration that you're putting different blocks on the tower. And then the question you have to ask yourself is, can our organization, can the tower that we have built support these extra activities? And if the answer is no, if there's no support, if there's no resources, if the skills are not there, very likely your tower is going to topple. The fourth hurdle, as you might have noticed already, is that customer-centeredness or customer centricity is not a project. It should not be treated as a project. A lot of organizations that you know of today use the NPS score. And why did you use the NPS score? It's a KPI that is easy to measure, but oftentimes organizations do not know, why are we applying an NPS score? Because an NPS score asks, how likely are you to recommend this organization to somebody else? And then it looks into how many people said yes and how many people said no, and then you know the promoters and the detractors. But at the end of the day, the goal should be, what do we want to do with it? Do we want to be an organization that is recommended to others, and why? How do we differentiate ourselves from other organizations? And doing just an NPS measurement is not enough to make your organization customer-centered. What happened often as well is at one point I had a colleague that had to present the NPS scores in the morning, and the NPS scores weren't good. And he told his manager, look, these are the numbers. And the manager said, change them. And he said, but I can't do that. That it would be messing with the process. At the meeting later that night for senior management had changed the numbers, and suddenly the NPS score was positive. Again, this shows that the way that people are treated based on the NPS score is not correct. There is no openness, because if you are an organization that is truly customer-centered, you would want to know what goes poorly in order to take an action accordingly. It's the same thing when we have this discussion. You cannot become customer-centered by doing it a little bit. You cannot lose weight by dieting 50% of the time. You cannot get fit by going for a run once a week. You need to do it consistently. You need to do it thoroughly. You need to do it really. You need to decide, is this something that I want to devote time and energy to on a consistent basis? Because if you don't, it's not gonna work. This is also an interesting one. This is the design squiggle. I don't know if probably a lot of people have seen it. Design squiggle shows that the process is very messy in the beginning. When you, for example, when you think about design thinking or UX, you start with these discovery phases, and then at the end of the day, you start with these discovery phases, and the squiggly becomes it takes all different shapes and forms. And people say, yeah, but you have to do this process. You have to go through it. But what they don't say often is that your organization also has to tolerate the first part. You have to have an organization that tolerates the chaos, that enables you to make decisions, make failures, try things out, fail, succeed, learn. What they only, companies usually are very good at is the final phase, having something and implement it, because it's very easy. You just have to facilitate it. And this is what I want to say is usually it's not the process. It is the organization that has to facilitate the process. And facilitation goes beyond merely doing the process well. It's having the management structure, it's having the culture, it's having the resources. And that's something very important to take into consideration. And lastly but not least, I've said this many times, is that a lot of the times, these design departments or UX departments or CX departments try to grow through their process throughout the entire organization. They try to grow from a team to include the rest of the organization. So they leverage the process. So what I mean by that is that is a little bit of exemplified by the double diamond. So the British Design Council, you remember the double diamond I showed you? Usually it used to have only 2 diamonds, but they gave an updated version where they also pay attention to engagement and leadership. And the reason they did that, because of course they noticed that if you do a process like this and management is not there, or there's no engagement with different teams, they tend to fail. So they said, okay, we need to leverage the process and go beyond, involve management. And again, this might be tricky, but again, it shows the importance of going beyond the process. I just want to give a little bit of attention to the UX maturity models. David already discussed the UX maturity model last week, but I want to show that I think it's a dangerous thing for these maturity models, and you have a lot of them that look into how mature, what is the UX maturity? What is the design maturity? What is the design thinking maturity? Because at the end of the day, so here's another one. This is the Temkin model. I think Forrest or Temkin, or no, Bruce Temkin, excuse me, that looks into, okay, UX is not important. UX is not important. UX is very important. UX is critical at level 4, is the core. Okay, and again, it's about UX. Good, excellent. And then, for example, here you have the Norman Nielsen, and it's usability. And what I want to say is, whether it is UX, usability, design, accessibility, design thinking, or anything else, the question is, do you care about your customer? And at the end of the day, if the question there is yes, you'll use the right methodology. If you really think that it's important to make something that users can use, you'll look into usability, you'll look into UX. And this for me is why customer centricity is so important, because in essence, it encompasses that. But the big question is, how do you achieve that? And how do you look into it? So what we did is we started a year ago by looking at all of these different UX maturity models. And then we said, look, it isn't about UX. It isn't about accessibility, as I mentioned, but there are common themes between all of these UX models. For example, all of them address at least 3, 4, or 5 of these dimensions that we have here. Either they address leadership. Of course, they're just a process. What is your process? How do you do it? What is your creative process? What is your engineering process? What is your development process? They also look into, do you have the right resources? You have the money, you have the people, you have the skills. They also look into the organization. Are you capturing information throughout the organization? Are you using it in your design process? And then they look into culture. And really, culture is, at the end of the day, is the fluffiest of it all, but it defines all of the rest. Do you have a culture that enables you to actually do UX? Do you have a culture that enables you to do customer experience, usability, design thinking? A lot of the time, it goes the other way around. It is, they look at UX and then they look at the other organization. And what we try to do here is look at the organization and then look at the process. So let's dig a little bit deeper into it. So what we did was we went out and we spoke to a lot of business leaders. We did our own research and we said, okay, what are the common themes when it comes to, for example, creating a customer-centered leadership within an organization? And these are things that always came back. So first of all, do you have a vision? It might seem easy, but vision for me means is, do you know where you want to go? Do you have an idea? What is it that you want to achieve? And again, it could be that within your specific vision in your organization, customer intimacy or customer centricity or whatever you want to call it is not important, but then so be it. It's fine. But then don't try to do customer-centered things if that's not important within your vision. If it is, if it adds to the purpose of your organization, then fine. Then translate that into a strategy. And a strategy really operationalizes the vision. Okay, we want to be customer-centered, or we want to provide the best user experience to our service clients. Then you're going to see, okay, how can we do that? That means that all interaction, all touch points must be measured, optimized, analyzed, etc. And this is very important to look at. Second one is decision making. So everything around decisions. Who is able to make decisions with regards to customer experience, customer centricity within the organization? Always very important to see, is there a person responsible? Where is he? Where he or she? What kind of role or responsibilities does this person have? Last but not least is KPIs. KPIs look into, okay, what are we trying to do? Because you have an NPS score, but usually an NPS score doesn't say anything. You have to decide for your organization, what is a KPI that we want to chase, where we want to improve. Is it customer churn? Fine, but look into the KPIs that define why people are leaving you as a paying or as paying customer or a user. Last but not least, for leadership, we found that the last three ones are very important. Is more of a softer aspect. Is, are leaders within your organization actually interacting with customers? And it's important that they not only interact with the big accounts, the big clients, but they have active attention to all of them. 6 is the acceptance to change, to failure, and also change. If you remember the design squiggle that I showed you, is, are they willing to fail within the first part in that squiggle, within the chaos, within the discoveries? Are they willing to do that? And last but not least is, does the behavior of management reflect what they are trying to achieve with regards to their customer? Are they mocking a customer? Are they asking you about information about your customer? How are they doing it? What are they doing? How are they rewarding your behavior, both formally and informally? These are very important things. Again, I won't go into detail about every single one, because, but again, if you look at your organization, these are things that you could take into consideration. Okay, perhaps you have a vision, but perhaps it's not translated into a strategy, concrete goals. Perhaps you have KPIs, but you have nobody that is able to make decisions on those. Again, very important to look at. The second, when we look at the process, we look into customer intelligence gathering. How do you gather customer information? Where from? With whom? With methods? How do you involve customers in the creative and development processes? Is it before, during, after, throughout, or is it to define potential new projects? What is the organizational responsiveness? If you find out that there's an issue with regards to your customers or users, how fast can you respond by creating multifunctional, cross-departmental teams? Are you able, or are you not able? And last but not least is a very important one that is often overlooked. How do you handle complaints? And complaints is not necessarily the formal complaint process, but could also be negative customer feedback. How is it handled? How is it stored? How is it responded to? A lot of organizations, from our experience, are not interested in negative customer feedback. They only want the good things. But the problem is, you don't learn that much from the positive ones. You only learn a lot from the negative ones. Again, very important when you look at processes. And what we do here is we try to make it independent from UX or usability or design thinking, because all those 4 things are relevant for UX, for CX, for design thinking. Organization. When you look at the organization, it goes beyond. It goes to how do the different parts of the organization interact. For example, what is the learning ability? Are you asking the same questions to your researchers every year? Do you have a database? Do you have a CRM tool? Roles and responsibilities, also very important. Is it clear who does what and why? A big problem that we see within UX and CX departments is that you have a UX designer, but nobody knows what the hell this person does. Does he do research? Does she do design? What do they do by communication or visual design? Usually the roles and responsibilities within customer centricity are very, very poorly defined. Information dissemination. How are you spreading information? Is it through a CRM system? Is it through informal briefing? Is it through reports that get stuck in desks? How are you spreading information throughout your organization? 4 is collaboration. How are different teams collaborating? Are they sharing resources? Are they not? Are they working together? Is sales working with marketing? Is sales working, for example, with engineering? How is marketing informing all different parties? Always very important. The 5th point here is a very important one, is are you involving your customer-facing personnel? Very important, because these people usually have a lot of information about the customers that are not leveraged. Usually the sales channel is used as an output channel rather than also a two-way dialogue channel, because sales are the people that meet your customers most. But again, what often happens in organizations, they say, okay, we disregard sales and we pay an external consultant to go talk to our customers. And I always think that's kind of disappointing. 6, we have the experience overview. Do you have an overview of the different touch points that your customers or user have with your organization? Who has that? Who can provide input to that overview? And last but not least is, how is your organization structured? Are you structured in different silos? Are you structured in a matrix system? What is the organization, and does it enable you to be customer-centered? Again, sometimes an organizational structure is such that it makes it very difficult for you to interact with different parts of the organization. Resources. Resources is very straightforward. It's usually about people and money. When we talk about people, we talk about how are performance evaluated. If somebody does something very positive for a customer, is this person rewarded? Is he or she given a standing ovation, a piedestal? Are they rewarded, or are they just given a tap on the back informally? And because that, again, all of these are important, but you have to see how you manage it. How are you selecting skills? How are you developing skills, and is the demand for these skills managed? Do you have a UX team? Fine. Who is asking the UX team for input? Do you have a CX team? Fine. Which questions do they receive? How is demand managed and prioritized? And then you have financial resources. Where does the money come from to finance these customer centricity activities? In order, for example, to improve a certain touch point or to develop something new, how do you involve UX people, CX people, design thinking people, or researchers? And last but not least is time allocation. And time allocation is a very tricky one because it's often forgotten. With time allocation, what we mean is, are people given the freedom and the time they need in order to work on the processes, the projects that have an impact on the customer? Are the for example, within project management, is there time allocated for the UX researchers at the appropriate time? How much time? Is it enough for them to do the activities that they want to do? If yes, fantastic. If no, why not? Lastly but not least, we have culture. And culture is such an important one, because in essence, what you could do is, if you look at the cultural dimension, it is the result of all of the other ones. We started at leadership, very tangible. Processes is tangible. Resources is tangible. Organization is tangible. Culture is really fuzzy and fluffy, and it is sometimes really intangible. So what we have to look into is, are employees empowered? Are they pushed to take control of the customer experience and are they empowered to do something about it? Agency, do they feel that they have control of it? If you ask somebody in your organizations, you can ask them, do you feel that you can have an impact on the customer experience? If the answer is no, it's also a very important sign. 3 is differentiation. How does the organization see itself? How do we differentiate ourselves with regards to other organizations, competitors? What do we do well? What do we consider us to be experts in? We could say, for example, we are the customer intimacy experts. But if you go outside and the customers say, this is the worst customer experience ever, there's a problem there. If you don't see yourself as in the same way that the customer does, this discrepancy must be addressed. Behavior, as we mentioned, by management and by colleagues alike, it's very important to define how customer-centered you will be or can be. Do your colleagues say, wow, this is the same customer complaining about the same thing? Or they say, look, it is a problem for this customer, we need to do something about it. And this behavior is very, very telling. Communication. Very important. It cannot be emphasized enough that communication of your vision, your values, your purpose, and what you want to achieve for your customers throughout the organization cannot be underestimated. Communication is very key to enable change management that you do need in order to become more customer focused, whatever the eventual goal might be. And last but not least is customer focus and customer feedback. Is how focused on the customer are we? Do people in the organization feel that within the culture we focus on the customer? Are we receptive to customer feedback? So in essence, what you have is these 7 points is something that you can poll within your organization to see, okay, do you feel empowered? Do you feel that you have agency? Do you feel that we are differentiating ourselves based on the customer experience? Yes or no? What is it that we do differentiate ourselves on? And all of these things, again, what is important here is the goal is to strengthen your culture. It is to create a culture that enables you to do usability work, accessibility work, design thinking work. It is not the other way around. You should not do UX to change your culture, but you should address your culture, do UX. If you have any question, please let me know. If you disagree, please let me know. You have my email address for any angry emails. Please address them to me. Thank you for being here. Have a lovely afternoon.